Henry Schoenfeld, in his Suite Charakteristik, composed in 1890, also incorporated African American folk music, and he argued that the American school of composition will be based upon the Negro melodies of the South, just as the Russians have founded the Russian school by looking to the Slav melodies. I also want to take a moment and just maybe go for a slight digression here. The person you see on the left is Charles Wakefield Cadman, who is an important composer in the early 1920s. So I'm fast forwarding just a little bit. And he was one of a group of composers that came to be known as the Indianist composers. You can see here the cover page of a set of compositions of his for American Indian songs. It says, founded upon tribal melodies. These were collected by Alice Fletcher, who is a well-known anthropologist, ethnographer, and important to note here, harmonized and elaborated by Charles Wakefield Cadman. And I think what's interesting is he actually saw his arrangements as realizing the potential implicit in these melodies. He said he and his colleagues simply take up the process where the Indian dropped it. It's worth noting that Cadman actually came to Tacoma in March of 1917. He came to Tacoma and did a concert of Native American music, of these kinds of musics. And the Ladies Musical Club of Tacoma also put on concerts of Indian music. And so if you think about it, these encounters with music are really kind of problematic. On the one hand, you have Dvorak encountering Native American and African American music through his students and kind of transforming it and including it in his symphonies. In other cases, you have people like Cadman here who are encountering Native American music and doing their best to kind of improve upon it or pick up where the native left off, as he said. And so I guess kind of what's interesting to me about this are the problematic kinds of encounters that were taking place in music around this time. If you listen to Cadman's music, it sounds a lot more like Schubert than it does anything by any Native American composer. So, writing in response to the 125th anniversary of the New World Symphony, Douglas Shadle, a musicologist who's currently working on a book on the New World Symphony, concludes with observing the symphony's true identity. Is it American? Is it Czech? Is it something else? Is it nothing at all? Has remained a source of debate to this day. But these discussions have taken for granted that the piece was sui generis and have obscured Dvorak's original purpose, to acknowledge the contributions that black musicians had already been making to the American cultural landscape. I think it's important, too, to think about how Dvorak's music mediates our encounters with American music. For instance, you may know the slow movement of the New World Symphony, and there are people who say, well, it's based on a spiritual called Going Home. Well, in fact, Going Home is not originally a spiritual. Going Home was composed, the melody was composed by Dvorak, and somebody came along and set music to it. And the fact that we believe that it's a spiritual, or should I say perhaps an original spiritual and not Dvorak's composition, I think says a lot. So what I'd like to do is just take a couple minutes, give you a chance to hear a little bit of the second movement of the New World Symphony and a little bit of Going Home.